get off your phone, get off your screen, take a deep breath, even if it's literally a minute, 2 minutes, where you just sit quietly and pay attention to what's going on in your own body. And it is miraculous what can actually emerge from that.
It's a hard time to be a leader, but it's a great time because if you're awake, it's a really interesting situation that we're in that you have to navigate.
Yeah, sometimes you're watching a movie like, let's say Titanic, you know how it's going to end. This is a movie, we don't know how it's going to end, right? We don't know. And so it really is a remarkable time.
You can emulate, you can be inspired, but you're not going to be Richard Branson. You're not going to be Steve Jobs. You're not going to be Jeff Bezos. You're not going to be a Starbucks guy, whatever his name is. I can't remember. You know, they're all amazing stories and we should be inspired by them. But the lessons that they share are not necessarily going to be applicable to what you as an individual want to be doing every day.
This is the secret of growing yourself, is knowing how to do it and not push too hard when you're not ready, to be gentle with yourself, push when you've got the energy, just treat it as a learning experience.
You can quiet your ego and it's not that complicated, but you got to start, you got to be motivated, and you got to see the benefits.
Hi, this is Andy. We've all heard that leadership is both an art and a science, right? I mean, it's true that many of our guests over the years have used rigorous research as the basis for their recommendations. Yet it feels like when you scan the shelves of most bookstores, it seems like many leadership books focus more on the art than the science. So to help us bridge the gap between research and real-world leadership, I'm thrilled to welcome Jeffrey Hull and Margaret Moore to the podcast. They are co-authors of an insightful new book titled The Science of Leadership: 9 Ways to Expand Your Impact. Now, this isn't just another book on leadership. They synthesized 50 years of leadership research into a comprehensive yet accessible guide for seasoned and aspiring leaders, and I might say anyone who wants to help their boss become a better leader as well. Jeff and Meg are coaches and leaders of the Institute of Coaching and have translated tens of thousands of studies and articles into a practical self-coaching roadmap. Whether you're a project manager, a team leader, or someone helping others grow, this is a book that's got something for you. In today's discussion, we'll explore why self-awareness, part of what they call conscious leadership, is foundational. We'll talk about how to lead with authenticity across cultures, how to measure your readiness to grow as a leader, and what quieting your ego really looks like. Whether you're leading a team at work, managing a project across time zones, or parenting your kids through the daily chaos of life, this episode is packed with insight you can use right away. I can't wait to share the discussion with you. Hey, quick note. If you or someone you know is thinking about getting PMP certified, we put together a super helpful guide called The 5 Best Resources to Help You Pass the PMP on Your First Try. We've helped thousands of people earn their certification. We'd love to help you too. It's totally free, and it's a great way to get a head start. Just go to 5bestresources.peopleandprojectspodcast.com to grab your copy. Again, that's 5bestresources.peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Let's make this the year you get your PMP. Let's jump into our discussion with Jeff and Meg about their new book, The Science of Leadership. Hey, thank you both for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Great to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Hey, so glad. I've really been looking forward to this. We'll get to some ideas from the book in just a bit, but I'd love to learn more about the backstories of our guests. And you mentioned in the book, for example, that the leadership style of one of the case study leaders named Sidney was influenced by his family environment while he was growing up. So Jeff, let's start with you. Was there anything from your family culture or experiences growing up that influenced how you think about leadership?
Wow. It's always challenging to start from the very beginning, as they say. It sounds like
born at a young age. Right? Yeah.
The sound from The Sound of Music.
Right.
Start at the very beginning.
Right.
I think that what I would say is this, that like all of us, I had some level of a traumatic start to life, and trying to work through some of the challenges of my early life was one of the reasons why I decided to go into therapy, actually to have therapy in my life as an early young adult,
Sure.
and then ultimately to become a therapist.
Yeah.
And that is what led me to be a coach. And I, upon reflecting on that journey, one of the most powerful experiences, healing experiences for me was working in groups. So
Mm,
it was like a group therapy dynamic that
yeah.
I was in early on, which is a little bit like a family situation,
Mm,
right? And what that led me to was my PhD dissertation, which was really about what makes a group come together and work towards helping someone heal. And
mm,
that was like setting up therapy for myself,
right.
therapy for my psychology dissertation. But the reason I mention it is that the number one outcome of my research was that when you put a group together, even in a therapy situation, the key to success is the leader.
That's interesting.
And so
Yeah.
I look back on that now and I think, even when I was thinking early in my career as a psychologist, as a
Hmm.
psychotherapist, leadership was really already playing a
Hmm.
key role in the way that I thought about group dynamics. And so later, when I became a coach and started working with Margaret at the Institute of Coaching, it was sort of natural to pay attention to what makes leadership work.
Mm.
And so it goes all the way back to my wanting to
Yeah.
heal my own issues. And I'd
Yeah.
probably, if I had another hour, I'd talk you through my dad and all of that. But just to make the
Oh,
connection between leadership and, healing and fulfillment and bringing the most out of people, I think it goes all the way back to my early beginnings
I
in
appreciate the transparency because I can't tell you the
uh,
number of people have told me that their research started as me search, right? And
yeah,
I think there's a fair amount of truth to that, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Meg, how about you?
Well, I go right back to two experiences. When I was fit, so I was born on a dairy farm. My
Mm,
dad was a farmer, my mother was a teacher. I had no exposure to business at all.
mm.
And when I was 15 in my phys ed class, I was picked to go to a leadership camp. I had no idea. And I wasn't just, the guys were all hockey players, girls were all,
Of course.
so we're in this very athletic space. And I have a picture of myself at 15. And when you see it, if it's 50 years ago, I actually look almost the same. There's a poise there that I had as if I didn't know it,
All right.
but I had this moment and I'm only now feeling like I did at that moment. I mean, that's a big deal.
That's a
50
big deal.
years of
Yeah. Right.
living
Yeah.
and leading and all of that. So, and then I went to MBA school, which was my breakthrough
Yeah.
from the old world to my new world. So that's in the 80s, and I loved Michael Porter's book on competitive strategy. I love strategy, and I'm actually falling back in love with strategy. Because we don't describe coaching as strategy, even though it really is.
That's interesting.
Then I spent decades. I married two scientists at different times. I love science. I love scientists. I'm a biologist. That was my undergraduate. And so then coming back and then diving into the research that wasn't there, when I was picked for the leadership camp,
Sure.
and it wasn't there when I was in MBA school, is like the most amazing validation, because the research, a lot of people are going to learn from this, but a lot of good leaders are also going to get validated
Mm.
from this book, because all those small, quiet, humble things you do to make things better are actually what works.
That's beautiful.
It's
Yeah.
not the big charisma, big announcements. It's actually the daily interactions with people in a way that makes them feel like you understand them and
Hmm.
you really have their back and you want them to do the best that they can. And so this, I think for both of us, this is a very meaningful moment to us too. And we
Yeah.
we had to work hard on this. It was a lot of work. I mean, really a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
In fact,
15,000 articles and
yeah, in
studies,
fact,
right? I mean,
we weren't going to call it the science of leadership. In fact, that was our editor's idea.
mm,
We were going to call it self-transforming leadership. And then our publisher has an approach where before you even start writing the book, you survey hundreds of people on the title.
mm.
And he threw in the title list, the science of leadership. And 67% of the people who completed the survey picked the science of leadership.
Wow.
Jeff and I are saying,
Yeah,
oh
okay.
no, we didn't sign up for that. And we didn't but we did, we leaned in. So yeah, so this is a book that we've been called to do. It's a joy. We are channeling the good work of the
Mhm.
scientists. It's
It-
not our work.
well, it's beautiful. And I think you represent that really well. I feel like so many books are like, not really, but it feels like a little bit of like, be like me. This is what I did. do that, and maybe their entire wings, that's an exaggeration of libraries, but it feels like just filled with leadership books. And you care so much about the science of leadership. So I'm just curious. This is probably ridiculous questions, but what are the types of books that kind of, when you see it, just kind of make you shake your head and go, I don't know, it's cotton candy, or it's not gonna be helpful. Meg, anything come to mind to you?
Well, when I read a book on blockchain on my vacation in the Caribbean. That says a lot about
Wow.
I'm 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 naturally interested. I mean, I'll have time for fiction later in
Right,
life, but
right.
and I like biographies, but when people build new frameworks out of existing data and help us understand who we are and how we operate, the nature of human nature. I mean, the whole AI debate, AI versus humans, AI plus humans is more or less, I mean, that is fascinating as a human endeavor, what's going on here right now.
For
And
sure.
it's playing out in front of us. And so it's a great time to it's a hard time to be a leader, but it's a great time because if you're awake, it's a really interesting
Yeah.
situation that we're in that you have to navigate.
Yeah. Sometimes you're watching a movie like, let's say Titanic, how it's going to end. This is a movie. We don't know how it's going to end, right? We don't know. And
No.
so it really is a remarkable time. And maybe every generation has felt like this, but this feels like a uniquely, a unique time like that. Jeff, regarding the books, any thought from your standpoint of like a lot of leadership books are kind of like this, and how yours you'd say is different?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting for me personally is that I actually really love biographies
Mm.
and I read a lot of them and
Hmm.
I thoroughly enjoy digging into the psyches, of the two of us. So I'm the psychologist and Meg's the scientist, which makes for a good combo.
Right.
But I love reading the narratives of famous CEOs and of writers. But the challenge with that in the context that we're coming at leadership is that you can emulate, you can be inspired, but you're not going to be Richard Branson. You're not going to be Steve Jobs. You're not
Right.
going to be Jeff Bezos. You're not going to be a Starbucks guy, whatever his name is. I can't
Yeah.
remember. They're all amazing stories and we should be inspired by them. But the lessons that they share are not necessarily going to be applicable to what you as an individual want to be doing every day. First of all, they're contextual, right? They had a particular time and place, and things change. We just talked about change.
Yeah.
And so I think what we tried to do in our book was actually to go back more to fundamentals that the academics that study leadership are telling us. And it's in some ways more subtle than some of these bigger voices that we
Hmm.
all read about. So I'm a bit of a paradox. I love reading those biographies because I
Hmm.
think they're inspiring. I think they're interesting, but I wouldn't want to necessarily lead like many of those folks. Or
Yeah.
I have to say, like many of those guys, because a lot of them
Oh,
are
that's true. That's a good
well-known
point.
white guys, right? So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's kind of where I come out. We're trying to do something very different in this
Yeah.
book.
I don't know. I can't even count. I'm sure I could try the number of leadership books we've covered on the podcast, but we've never had one single definition of leadership that seemed to be common across all the books. So there's countless of these definitions, right? So Jeff, you have a section in the book where you say, this is what we mean by leadership. So I'd love to hear how you would say that, and then maybe have Meg point out why the components of that definition are particularly helpful.
Well, I'm going to leave it to Meg to frame the overarching leadership definition that we
Okay.
chose out of the research. But what
Yeah.
I will say as a kickoff to that is that fundamental theme here is that key to effective leadership is really what the followers do, not so much what the leader does. And that's often a wake-up call for people when they start to think about, because historically we think of leadership as a trait-based definition. You have X, Y traits. You're charismatic, you are effusive, you're visionary, whatever it is. And the research has shown that it's really not about you as an individual. It's about how you act, how you show up, but how you impact others
Mm.
is key. And I'll turn it over to Meg to give a little more framing around that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so we are leaning, I mean, there are a lot of definitions in the literature too. So we leaned on one that was very recent. It starts by saying that leaders mobilize others' motivation to move towards shared goals, with the caveat that we're not motivating them,
Right.
we're helping them motivate themselves.
Yeah.
So That's a big shift.
Hmm.
I'm not the source of their motivation. I'm the facilitator.
Right.
So they have to get their internal motivation, autonomous motivation based on meaning and having fun and enjoying that has to be unleashed. The leader is shaping and influencing the narrative,
Hmm.
right? Like when
Yeah.
Andy Jassy came out and said, we're just going to lay off a lot of people, and
Right.
that was not a good narrative.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, it was like we're a victim of this AI stuff. It's going to take us wherever it takes us.
Hmm.
You know, we'll, sorry, we can't tell you any more than that.
Hmm.
That's not shaping the narrative, right?
Hmm.
That's actually scaring the hell out of everybody.
True. Yeah.
And so that's not an influential narrative, and that's not going to draw anybody to go down that path, right? So that's a really good example of not doing it well. And then the second big thing is that leading is done through relationships,
Mhm.
human relationships. The higher, and we talk about work connections. Don't get too attached to your work
Yeah.
connections. It's all wrong. Work relationships are actually the richest source of relationships. Even if you let people go or you
Yeah.
fall out, they're still our major playground for rich, deep, collaborative relationships. And those kinds of relationships are more influential. You can help people better, you can inspire them better, you can help them learn better. So relationships are they exist for their own sake because you care. And then the last piece, as Jeff's already said, that leadership researchers measure the behavior, the performance, the well-being of the followers
Hmm.
and the organizational results.
So interesting.
Um, so, so for example, an authentic leader, a humble leader, that might be good for you, your performance, or not. But what matters is the impact on others. If they perform better because you care about what they value, and you dim your light just enough so that they can shine,
Mhm.
that's good for them. So you're in this place. This is where the quiet ego comes, because servant leadership suggests we're just all about service and we
Mhm.
forget about ourselves, right? That's Mother Teresa. That's not everyday leading, and that's not healthy for most of us.
Mhm.
The quiet ego is the idea that we have a balance.
Mhm.
We as leaders, we take care of ourselves. We're authentic because it's good for us. We're whatever we do, we take care of our health and wellness, and we're creative, and we do all the things we need to do. But we equally care, and when we care about others, we forget about ourselves. So it's this nice back and forth oscillation between self and other. That balance requires fair amount of maturity, right? Because you can't be in yourself with all your stress and all your concerns. You have to really be with other people. So that's the recipe in a nutshell,
Mhm.
is to draw out people's best passion and motivation and to relate closely, and then to shape the narrative, and then to help them perform better.
I feel like the book just really elaborates on just what you both said there so well. I was thinking at one point of, was it Animal House, where John Belushi's like, "Let's do it." He runs out of the room and no one's following him. You know, yeah, there's, you're not a leader if they're not following, and all the focus on the leader sometimes instead of the follower. And we had a guest who wrote a book called "You Can Change Other People," and it sounds presumptuous, right? But ultimately, it's a provocative title, but it was, you have to create the conditions under which people are willing to change themselves. And I think that's really where you go with this, right? We're not motivating other people. We're trying to, that's what I took away from the book. You have to set the conditions under which people are willing to motivate it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
think that was probably Peter Bregman.
Yeah. Peter's been a guest
He's a
multiple
good
times,
he's a
and
good friend of ours.
he's a good guy. He's a good guy. And
Yeah,
they've
and
had a lot.
his title is definitely provocative, but he
Yeah.
gets it. So
Yeah, I know it. For 100%. And I just feel like, Meg, what you said about the book is validating in many ways too, because sometimes this is the right thing. Invest in these relationships. Even there, they're saying, don't be friends with your driver. It's true, but you hear this. And so it's nice to have the research backing now about their relationships,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
instead of just the anecdotal
Your
stuff.
influence, yeah.
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 Yeah. Meg, your book's self-rating tool, early on, and the readiness to improve chart. I'd never seen anything quite like that. I think they're powerful for self-assessment. So how
Yeah.
does you maybe gauge whether a project manager, maybe feeling stretched thin by deadlines, is truly ready to improve in one of these 9 capacities,
Right. Yeah.
whether it's conscious leadership or otherwise?
Yeah, so this is coaching science
Yeah.
and self-coaching science in this case. And so, I mean, a good example is when people set resolutions, in January or whenever for the summer or whatever.
Yeah.
Or when you leave your boss's offices, yes, I'm going to get better at that.
Mm.
The I'm going to get better at that is one part of you that's aspiring to get better at that, but there's the rest of you is not on board.
Right.
Right. So the science around, so motivation is one half of the drive to change. You want it, and you want the bigger the reasons, the more they bring tears to your eyes, the more important it is for you, the more you will persist.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to find the whys, as many as you can, but and some important ones. But the how is the hard one, because we don't have the neural networks. We actually don't have the system in place in our brains that underpins the change, right? We're actually creating it. So we're practicing, and it's hard. It's really hard work. So the confidence building is also, it's where the heavy lifting is. And so you want to be good to yourself by saying, okay, where am I ready to change? And we built this simple rubric where you score motivation and confidence in a two axes, zero to 10, and you really need both of them, motivation and confidence, at least a 6 to move forward. And if it's below that, just scale it back.
Hmm.
Not don't give up, just do less.
Hmm.
Like just set a lower bar for yourself. So you're really managing your own ability to change. So sometimes people want to make the big changes and they go after it and they really lean in. And sometimes you're just shaping it in small ways because that's all you've got time for. And so it's this is the secret of growing yourself, is knowing how to do it and not push too hard when you're not ready, to be gentle with yourself, push when you've got the energy, just treat it as a learning experience. There's a wonderful distinction between looking good and getting better.
Mm.
Looking good is you're performing really well, like you just look good,
Yeah.
you're on your game, you're doing your thing. Getting better, you're awkward, you're clumsy, you say the wrong thing,
Right.
you jump in the wrong moment, and that's getting better.
Yeah.
And a coaching culture is defined by giving a lane, a channel for people to be not looking good, but getting better, and that's actually a good thing. And it's inherent in self-change, is that you still have to look good some of the time, but you also got to say, look, I'm trying to get better here, and I'd really love some feedback. I've never run this meeting this way. I know you guys have been telling me, I'm project manager, I know you've been telling me that I need to do this a little differently. I'm going to try, but I haven't got it down yet. Can you help me? Right? And
Mhm.
then you get everybody into this mode of, yeah, let's help each other. How can we get better, as opposed to getting sort of locked into our fixed modes.
I think it's so good. Like I feel like so much focus was about looking good. And that helps you, that keeps you maybe from taking the risk of trying to get better, right? And then we just play it safe, and then 20 years later, it's really not that much different. So yeah, I love that. Jeff, a leader from outside the US, told me that practicing, in this case, it was servant leadership, but we could maybe even take a couple of the ideas from the book. In his culture, would be seen as weak. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious how do cultural norms and values shape
Yeah.
the way that these 9 capacities are practiced or perceived?
Yeah, I agree. I agree that depends on where you are in the world, but cultures do vary greatly. And which is one of the things that Margaret and I thought through a lot when we were doing the research for this and writing the case studies, is that I can't remember the number of countries, but it's something like 22 countries are represented in terms of the academics that were studying leadership in their environments.
Mhm.
And we wanted to make sure we also had case studies that were
Yeah.
from the Middle East, that were from different countries, different parts of the world. And you're absolutely right. There is one case study in the book that we talk about where one of my leaders went to the Middle East and was faced with that kind of Middle Eastern, I would call it the, Machiavellian culture, right? Which
Mhm.
is very sort of top down and directive. And, I think that individual's first reaction to the idea of servant leadership would have been that that's going to make me look weak. I'm not going to come across as competent. And the irony is it's exactly the opposite.
Mm.
That what was discovered was that the people were actually almost turned off by this outsider coming in from a different part of the world with all the answers.
Mm.
And not to criticize McKinsey, but this individual had happened to had an earlier career at
Yeah.
McKinsey, which is, as you know, one of the big
Mhm.
answer companies.
Mhm.
And so wanting to be a more transformational leader, that individual came to see that having the courage to innovate with humility actually was incredibly inspiring to the team around him. And it was such a huge wake up call to realize that he didn't have to have all the answers, because it was also really a lot of pressure to
Mm.
come from a different country,
Yeah.
to sort of get landed in as a big C-suite executive and then be told to transform the environment. It's like, yeah, sure, of course, I have all the answers. I
No
come from
problem.
X country and I know,
Yeah.
and then to take a deep breath, step back and say, you know what? There's a lot of talent right here in front of me. How can I engage them? How can I bring them in? How can I make them feel safe enough to be empowered and get back, as Meg said, to the motivation from within, right?
Mm.
And so his idea of servant leadership really had to shift from that's going to make me look like I'm not competent or I'm not confident, to actually it's going to come across as respectful of
Mm.
the people that I lead, of respecting that they have a lot to offer. And that's exactly what that individual discovered, was that there was so much talent already there, and that talent was just ripe for the asking. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, his bosses, I have to say, it's always a two-way street, right?
Mhm.
So this individual's bosses struggled a little. Like, how come you're not more directive?
Mm.
But, when they saw the results, they saw the innovation, they saw the transformation actually happening. They saw that the people in his team were highly engaged and excited and inspired. All they could say was, "Wow, okay, I guess you're doing something right. We'll leave you alone."
Interesting. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you're right. It depends on where you are in the world, what the context is, but fundamentally, humility does not necessarily have to make someone look weak. It can actually be an inspiration to
Yeah.
others.
That's
And
good.
it's timing,
Right. Right.
again, if that had been an emergency situation, then the research, as we discovered, would have said, that those people want a directing. They want
Mm.
someone in a pandemic, for
Mhm.
example.
Right.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
it varies, but
Mhm.
at the end of the day, the research definitely shows that servant leadership handled with maturity and openness and respect, really key there is the respect for the others,
That makes
can make
sense.
a huge difference in inspiring people to step
Yeah.
up.
Because like respect is the international language, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
transcends it for sure. And part of it, I wonder if it comes down to we have insufficient definitions of those in our mind as we think of servant leadership, and so
Yeah.
with a more full understanding, like you offer in the book, it's not it's not weakness necessarily. It's made up of these other things, and so. Meg, I just thought I'd ask you, like, how have you seen leaders do this, like adapt these capacities to try to avoid cultural missteps?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jeff would agree. When we're coaching people, we're not usually coaching on all nine.
Yeah.
I mean, now that when the book comes out, we may get requests to do that, but mostly you're working on one growth edge, as we call them,
Yeah.
in the moment. And they really vary. I mean, the one that's coming up right now for me, I've had um the ones that have been common for me is first people are reactive, the noisy ego.
Mm.
And then they don't see clearly, and then they don't have a good strategy. So that's an ongoing theme. But I've had the theme of confidence come up recently
Yeah.
twice, just in the last week. I am not feeling confident, and it could be the outside world, and actualizing and for women, see that's where the literature does it. Women generally they're getting more confident from over the decades, but women still have less confidence than men, and so have to work harder, try harder, dig deeper,
Mhm.
do more. So I would say confidence is a big deal, because if you are overconfident, then you have a confidence issue, because you're probably underconfident underneath the overconfidence.
Ironically.
And then if you're aware of your not being confident enough, so I'd say I think that's a big deal right now.
Mhm.
Is how am I gonna I've heard a bunch of retired people say, I'm glad I'm not a leader right now, because I don't know if I could handle this. Like
Hmm.
this is a whole different world. So I
Yeah.
think it's and that's where the 9 becomes relevant, because then you can pick and choose what's needed right now. I can't just rely on one approach.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I want to come back to servant leadership,
Yeah.
because servant
Please.
leadership isn't weak.
Right.
It actually, to be done well, it's based on strength. And it's the strength of knowing what's needed and what people need to get stronger. And so sometimes you step back to let them get stronger, and sometimes you have to step in and model it. But you're coming from strength. You're
Mhm.
not like flailing around wondering what to do. You're like, and this is where what coaches are trained to do. We're deliberately using our energy and the dynamic to balance what other people need.
Yeah.
That's what we learn, to use the relationship to draw. We calm down when they're up, then when they're worked up, we arouse, we use our energy in a very deliberate way. And that's what leaders, it's a masterful thing. It's like conducting an orchestra.
Mhm.
And so nobody's looking at it says this looks weak.
Mhm.
Not at all. It's a higher level
Right.
of consciousness, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain amount of confidence to be a servant leader. Is the
Mm.
bottom line, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind, I think sometimes the word servant has baggage on it, just that
Yeah.
word. And so I wonder, and this isn't a fair question, so feel free to pass and we can edit it out. But like if you had to rename servant leadership to something different today without using the word servant, is there any word come to mind? Because it's fine as is, but for example,
Yeah.
serving leadership, would
Well,
that be different?
we say serve.
Yeah, yeah,
And service is a big deal for people.
yeah,
I
right,
mean, the military, there's
right,
lots of folks for whom serving something greater than
right,
themselves. So I wouldn't take away the word service.
yeah, right,
I
yeah.
mean,
Um,
one of my favorite words is steward.
Hmm.
And I love Richard. I think it's Peter Block who wrote a book called Stewarding Leadership, maybe
Mm,
10 years ago or something.
yeah.
And I thought that was actually a really, really good book.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know if it was heavily research based, but Peter Block is actually
Yeah.
a good author, a good leader himself.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
stewarding, I
Yeah.
mean, there's a level of empowering
Right.
that's important.
Right.
But the challenge with using empowering, and I think Margaret will agree with me on this one, is that empowerment is part of a lot of the different capacities.
Yeah.
So, because when you do relational leadership, it's really about coaching and helping and empowering. And when you do agile leadership, you want to flex back and forth between directive and participative. So there's an empowering component there. So yeah, I mean, I think we're probably stuck with serving.
Yeah. 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 Well, and like Meg was saying, that's not all bad, is it? But I just think it's
No,
interesting. And that's one of the values of the book, I feel like, is you get into the nuance and what does this study say? And so people can understand it better. Because I think at just the 30,000 foot level, it'd be real easy to misunderstand. In fact, I think all these have the potential we might jump to conclusion what it means. So for example, Meg, what does it mean to be a conscious leader? And maybe some of the hurdles, because that's a term that
yeah,
people might jump to conclusion of what does that mean?
right, right.
yeah, right. And we didn't necessarily stay with so there's a tribe associated with each of these
Right.
models.
Right.
But each of these models has 7 or 8, 10 elements.
Hmm.
And we identified the 1 or 2 that were unique to that model, because the others overlap with everything
Hmm.
else.
Yeah.
So we really tried to show that these are distinct.
Hmm.
And in conscious leadership, conscious capitalism, it's more like what we describe as authentic, which is being, conscious of the impact, the downstream impact of your leadership. You as a leader, the organization's impact, and being awake, meta awareness. So we went with the conscious, the mindfulness, the noisy ego, not with the virtuous, conscious capitalism, like capitalism to
Right.
serve the planet. So we did that. So that's why and then we ended up with conscious being to just simply be about seeing clearly with all the noise. I mean, just take the war in Iran, right? What exactly is happening here? What are the risks? Nobody know. You can't find anybody with a balanced, conscious, clear seeing, do they have nukes? Do they not have nukes? Is this, is this the right thing? Is it the wrong thing? Almost nobody can see clearly, because we've got our biases and we've got what we believe politically, and we've already said, blah, 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 blah. So that is the fundamental challenges we don't see clearly because our egos wish and want and hide and for our own self-protection, it's a natural defense, right? And so that we really wanted to get that across, that you need to see things as they are. And that's a cold, shine the harsh light on what is happening. How are people responding to me? How is my organization being perceived? What is the impact if we do this, this, and this? That cold, analytical clarity, that's what science is about. Get rid of the noise and what is the signal here that we're meant to take away. And the scientists use some very complex mathematical modeling, statistical analyses across all these studies to try to pick out. It's very tough work. It's harder than writing a book,
I bet.
honestly. I mean, and then nobody reads it. So getting at the truth is the thing that you have to start with, because if you don't see it clearly, then you're going to go all down. You're going to go off the rails all the way down
Yeah.
the line.
Counterpoint to that,
Please.
because I totally agree with everything Meg said, but in counter to that, there's also a simplicity in seeing clearly and seeing objectively. And the place to find it is probably that's most accessible to people would be a sort of Buddhist approach, which is to step back and actually watch yourself, right? I mean, anyone who reads any kind of Buddhist literature, and there's all sorts of variations of Buddhism, but the Eastern tradition will say that the starting point, it's usually focused on the breath or a mindful practice, but the core of it is to step aside from the self and actually have a moment, even if it's a micro moment, where you observe yourself clearly. You see your own mind, which is a monkey mind, kind of constantly moving. So, as complex as it is, there is a core simplicity
Yeah.
to becoming objective within the self.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we also want to reinforce for leaders that are reading about conscious leadership is that, yes, it's a very rich, complex subject, but it starts with a very simple practice, which is to stop, get off your phone, get off your screen, take a deep breath. And for my clients, I call it create a buffer, create a space, even if it's literally a minute, 2 minutes, where you just sit quietly and pay attention to what's going on in your own body. And it is miraculous what can actually emerge from that. Like this sense of centeredness and groundedness and clarity. And oh, there is an expert in my team that I need to talk to. I'd completely forgotten about that person because of all the noise, whatever it happens to be. But I just want to remind us that becoming conscious is a practice as well as a scientific concept.
I feel like your book does such a good job of reinforcing what you both said, because I think because of what Meg said, a lot of times it doesn't get our attention because it's so complex, it's so buried, it doesn't get onto our desk, so we're not aware of it. And then your book tells you how to do it, just like you said, Jeff. It makes it accessible, and that's why I love it. And even terms like quiet ego and noisy ego and all that stuff, that's not something I've really kind of wrestled with before. So just as an example, Jeff, would you be up for describing, like, how do you describe a quiet ego when it comes to conscious leadership, and what does it mean, and maybe how do you quiet ego noise?
Well, I think it's a lifelong practice. So just to be clear that all of us, including me and Meg and all, are working our whole lives to develop a quiet ego. And we're not trying to denigrate the ego. My original training was in Jungian and psychoanalytic psychology, and developing the ego is actually a really important part of becoming an adult. You have to have a strong ego in order to be able to function in today's world. But the challenge as we get more mature with our egos is the ego is based on developing capacities and strengths that you needed as a child. And so then you're no longer a child. And it's still doing what it did when you were 12 or what you were 14 or what you were 7. And you don't need that anymore. You don't need to protect yourself. You can actually have a lot more variety, have a lot of choices. And so there's an internal process of quieting the ego, which is actually just becoming awake to your own narrative, your own stories and your patterns. And then there's the recognizing of the noise that's coming at us from the outside world, right? I mean, and I don't think I need to remind people of what we're dealing with from the outside world, but recognizing that you are being bombarded with data, with news, with screens, with, whether it social media, whatever it is, and that can have a negative impact on your ability to see clearly.
Yeah.
So developing practices and getting support, you don't have to do it alone. You can do it with a coach, you can do it with your team, you can do it with your partner, but developing practices that give you those momentary breaks away from that noise so that you can listen to yourself more clearly is really crucial to your effectiveness and your creativity. And I think what's our special offering here is Margaret and I are coaches. We're not scientists. What we do is respect the science, and we wanted to access the science, and we want to use the science. But it's our coaching mindsets that actually brings this book to life.
I agree.
Because we're actually saying, you don't need to read all the academic. We did that for you,
Right.
but you can quiet your ego, and it's not that complicated. But you got to start, you got to be motivated, and you got to see the benefits.
I heard someone say once that we're dealing with the 8-year-old version of people often during the day. Like, why did they act that way?
It's so true.
Well, it's true for me, every once in a while, like, why did I act that way? And, just, I don't know. I just feel like self-awareness is so difficult, of like
We are
understanding it myself.
instantly capable of regressing to about
Absolutely.
8.
I sign me up. I'm in the front of the line. There's 9 of them. We're only going to hit one more, but I'm interested, Jeff, in transformational leadership. Like, what does that look like in practice? And maybe especially I'm thinking of the project managers listening to us. We're very focused on goals and tasks, like I'm thinking of Joseph in your story of guitar.
I mean, yeah, transformational leadership is really powerful, and it's sort of the penultimate study that we did and look at in our book. And I think the key thing there is being able to inspire others with your vision, having a courageous, forward-thinking vision. And what's specifically special about the research is to not have it be just your vision, but to have it a we. There's a section in our book that we switch from the I-focused leadership modality to a we mindset, a collective mindset, a systemic approach. And so real transformational leaders will look to include others as they craft a vision, as they try to come up with a strategy. And the real benefit of that is multiple. One is that you get great ideas from others, but you don't always have to have all the answers in terms of the vision. And then secondly, when others get inspired to be part of the conversation, they're motivated to move forward towards the vision, and they'll have the courage to actually take the risks that you may need to take. So transformational leadership is about creating the we vision with others that can change the world. So that's one of the reasons why it's our sort of penultimate on our journey of leadership in the book, because it really is what we need more of in today's world, is true transformation.
Yeah, for sure. Meg, anything come to mind? I mean, there's a chapter full of ideas, but maybe a practical way to help develop.
The project manager. So we're now let's just imagine we're sitting at the table, managing a group of people trying to get something done.
Right.
The projects that matter are the ones that require changes in mindset and products and services and innovations. And I don't think creativity is just when you come up with a new product. Creativity is what you do day in, day out with projects. And the transformation is the home for creativity. And by creativity, we mean that you are creating new ways of looking at things. And the behaviors the vision is the first thing, but the transformation comes from that we're having a conversation, we've got a problem, we've got a challenge. That's an opportunity for transformation, because we're not seeing it clearly. We're not seeing all the forces that are driving it. We have a chance for a creative solution. And that's fun. You go nonlinear. You're brainstorming. There's some wonderful work in what's called novel problem formulation. Okay, so you've got a problem. What is it that leads to innovation? What approach to formulating the problem leads to innovation? It's when you think is about many, many, many different ways to look at it. So if you've got 4, 5, 10 people in the room, tell me your perspective on this. Like, just get lots and lots of perspectives. You don't try to solve it right away. You populate the working memory, so you've got and then you go for a walk. You take everybody out to sit under a tree. You go, you go do whatever you do
Yeah.
you forget about it.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you do creative things like draw pictures and do whatever and then the answers start to come.
Mhm.
So everybody managing a project can do that to unleash, like, here's a gnarly problem, but wow, we got it figured out. Like, it's all we drew it out, and we had fun with it.
Mhm.
And then we went away, and then we let our brains do their usual creative things. That's the transformation. It's the very diversified thinking. Let me look at it from up here, from down here, from over here, think about not, I say 9 perspectives, up with 9, because you can do it with the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, what if you saw clearly, what would this be? If you
Mhm.
cared about the outcome, what would you say? You
Right.
can use that. But basically, you have this diverse thing. This is what creates wisdom, too, is the diversity of perspectives. I remember coaching in a group session, having a woman doctor who was helping her kids with something. And I explained all this, and she said, "Oh, no wonder I'm not doing a good job with my kids, because I'm only bringing one perspective. I forgot about all these others, and they're not listening to me."
Right.
And she got it. You're not going to get the solution if you don't have enough wide and deep enough problem formula. So I just want to say that is the it of leading. The rest, everybody else can do. So I think service is not service for the sake of service. It's for the sake of transformation. If you frame it that way,
Yeah.
that we're really trying to make things better in novel ways. And that's something that AI will not likely do, not readily, because can't jump from one network to something else that didn't exist, right? Humans can imagine things that didn't exist before. That's the beautiful talent. So that is the end game. And if you just take transformational leadership by itself without conscious, authentic, agile, blah, 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 it can be overbearing. You
Mm.
have these transformational leaders who are really tough and mean, and there's a lot of damage in their wake, and they probably didn't get as much accomplished as if they had all of this, and the transformation was the end game. So all of this is ultimately about fostering creativity and innovation.
Yeah.
And anybody managing a project, I know you can relate to this. There's a bunch of things you'd like to transform in your
For
group.
sure.
I mean, you would just wish you could snap your fingers,
Oh yeah.
and this person would do that, and this thing would happen, and this obstacle would get out of the way. So if you lean in and say, okay, now we've got the ability to, like, turn the problem into strength and innovation. And same with the ego noise, turn the ego noise into strength and innovation. Same thing.
Yeah.
Whatever you put into the mill, you're going to get out something better. It's that creative neural network, integration process that is really like it's the real deal.
I think of the contrast of what's tempting for us project managers is like, show up at 11, we're going to be creative for the next half hour. It's like,
Yeah.
no,
Just
no,
minute.
no sitting under the tree, Meg. We don't have time. Yeah. Yeah. But if we get this idea, of how this works, which the book makes it clear. I mean, I feel like you're kind of getting 9 books in one, like you don't have to read. Actually, you're getting 15,000 studies in one book, right? So that's what you really get. But there's so many things we could talk about, but let's end with this because Meg, you kind of referred to somebody who's like got an aha regarding home. We have a lot of parents who listen to the podcast, and they're often hungry for ideas like, how can I lead better at home or nurture leadership in their children because of
Yeah.
times of great change? I mean, these are skills that they need. So, Meg, can you think of a specific capacity or maybe a tool from your book that parents could apply at home?
I'm going to zoom in on positive psychology and psychological capital, because that's the resources that give people the ability to do the rest. And this does come from positive psychology. So with kids, you want to foster agency and autonomy, but only to the extent that they can handle. So you're always balancing. I'm giving you the leash so you can grow and
Yeah.
outgrow my influence. But so that's very important. The second is the meaning, helping kids really relate to what's important to them, getting their heart, their values, what matters to you, like,
Yeah.
what's important about this? Because, it's hard to get kids to talk about what they're really thinking. I don't know if you find that. I mean, you can't get them. You have to go around in circles before you can crack it open and get them to really tell you what's going on, because there's a lot they don't know how to share it, they don't
Sure.
know what to say. So you want to get them talking about what's important. And then confidence. What will build their confidence? And and right now, there's so much pressure on I have 5 step grandkids, so I'm at all ages from 5 to 18,
Yeah.
and watching them, navigate, and the pressure on them right now is not what we had. It's
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah.
And so I think helping them feel strong and whole with all these social pressures around them so that they really are whole,
Mhm.
healthy young people. That's our main job as parents and grandparents, is to create the conditions for them to be strong and whole.
Yeah.
And that's a real, I think it's, you can call it parenting, but it is a form of leading.
For sure.
You're leading them, we're all leading ourselves, we're leading others, we're leading or coaching, one or the other.
Yeah.
And parenting is I think the more you treat kids like small adults than children, the faster they evolve, because they grow faster than you can keep up with sometimes. So,
Yeah.
so you really, yeah, you see, it's a real leadership opportunity for
I
parents. It's a
agree.
really great place to learn.
I know sometimes I feel that we've got 5 kids and I feel like 3 of them out of the house, but that transition from when the leash is short to the leash is longer and learning how to empower and build confidence and agency and all that. It's no leadership job is easy. Let's face it. Right. And that is one of the challenges, right?
You really don't know if you're doing the right thing.
For sure.
You
Yeah.
don't. You don't know until 20 years later. I
Right.
mean, that's the thing.
Well, they'll all be in
Isn't that
Jeff's office
right?
for therapy then at that point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, come on. Jeff, any other thoughts you might have for parents?
No, I mean, I think Meg encapsulated that really well.
Yeah.
So I don't think I will add anything.
Yeah, thank you. For those listening, we barely touched on what's available in Megan and Jeff's new book. If you would like to apply rigorous science about leadership into your day-to-day practice, I recommend you get a copy of The Science of Leadership. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for this cast. So, Megan and Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Great to be here.
Special thanks to Meg and Jeff for joining us here on episode 473 of the People and Projects podcast. I enjoyed that discussion. I enjoyed the book. What I like about it is how they distilled research that, for the most part, would not show up on our radar screen. Like there are academics out there doing research on leadership. And as Meg was talking about, it's complex research. And it just often doesn't get to popular press. And so they took that wide swath of research, found a way to harmonize them, these different models, because a lot of them are distinctly different models. But then what they did was they made them kind of combine so that we could understand them. And that's a project, just doing that. So despite the deep research and academic underpinnings that it has, the result, I found it's very accessible. Like I've had some books that were sent to me from publishers and like, oh my goodness, I can't even get through the first 5 pages. I mean, this was very accessible, very engaging. So I definitely recommend the book. I think you'll find it helpful in your personal leadership development journey. I found it helped me as I was going through the book. If you pick up a copy, I'd love to hear what you take away from it. You can reach me at show@peopleandprojectspodcast.com. Whether it's from the book or today's discussion, I'd love to hear what resonated with you. If you'd like more on this topic, I put links in the show notes to episode 344 with Peter Bregman. We actually talked about Peter a little bit during the interview. He's a friend of the authors here. He wrote a book about how you can change other people. But as I said during the interview, it's about how you can set the conditions under which people are willing to change. And that's consistent with this book as well. You can't motivate people, but you can set the conditions under which you do that. Also, episode 416 with Jim Kouzis. And Jim's actually been with us a total of 4 times. Each episode is talking about the research that he and his research partner, Barry Posner, have done on leadership. Definitely a strong leadership and evidence-based look at the topic. And episode 252 with Marcus Buckingham. He's the father of the strengths movement and a researcher at heart. But, this book is really insightful about, he calls it the 9 lies about work. And it's really about leadership and management. I think it's a very insightful book. And the interview, I highly recommend. So check those out. Hey, do you know someone who's looking to pass their PMP certification exam? We've got a guide called The 5 Best Resources to Pass Your PMP on Your First Try. We've been helping people earn their certification to prepare for the exam and to pass the exam for many years now. And we've distilled it into a free resource. And so if you are that person or you know somebody else, go to 5bestresources.peopleandprojectspodcast.com and you or they can download it and get started with that. And one last thing, if you've not left a review of the People and Projects podcast, we'd love for you to do that. It just takes a couple minutes. You can do that on Apple Podcasts or wherever you consume your podcasts. And we would just so much appreciate that as a team. On behalf of myself and the team that helps put this together, thank you very much for listening.